Chof Hey, 1965. And the Rebbe has a very interesting insight into what's going to happen when Moshiach comes, and the lessons that we learn from Megillas Esther. So we're going to start from the bottom of the page, 2 paragraphs from the bottom, Ois Lamed. Yesh Oid Limud Megillas Esther. There's another lesson we could derive from Megillas Esther. I mean, earlier in the Farbrengen the Rebbe spoke about other lessons. And as Esther asked, Kisvuni ledoiros, make sure to write down my story for all generations. In other words, to make it part of Jewish canon, make it part of Tanakh, which means it's not just about having a book called Esther, but it's obviously that it should be a lesson for all generations. As we know that only the nevuos that were negeh for all generations were written down. Shal Yodoi, through this lesson, Mituretzes kash kushya b'chlos hashkafas ha'toira Yehudim v'yadus ala olam. There is answered through the lesson from Megillas Esther that we're about to explain a general question in the view of the Torah and Yiddishkeit and Yidden on the world in general. Gam l'loy ha'inyan d'chesed l'umim chatos, even without the idea that the kindness of nations is considered a sin. Earlier in the Farbrengen, he spoke about that. Since the Jewish people are the fewest, the smallest of all the nations, and not only that, amongst the Yidden themselves, at the moment, those that are acting in the manner of Mordechai Esther, in other words, following and acting in a way that's appropriate and in concert with Yiddishkeit, is not a majority that will overrule the others. So the question arises, Eich Yitochen, how is it possible that such a huge world is like spinning around bishvil kvutza ktana kleina hefela shel Yehudim shemisnagim keretzoyin Mordechai v'Esther, a small group of Jews that are acting according to the wishes of Mordechai and Esther. You have in other words, how many Frum Yidden do you have already in the world? And the whole world revolves around them. And the Rebbe is going to elaborate on this question using a metaphor. This is analogous to L'nil beis charoishes atzum, that you're running a big factory. You have many machines and a lot of expenses to be able to manufacture a small thing. Even a human being, that he could make mistakes, still in all, there's no place to invest thousands upon thousands of golden dinars, to be able to get the return. The profit will only be an item worth 1 golden dinar. So that is a human being that's liable to make mistakes, won't make such a mistake. How much more so concerning Hashem, he is perfect in all of his actions. There surely must be an understanding and explanation in running such a vast world, for you that is the few amongst the nations that are living. There's a very few amount of people that are living a life in accordance with Torah mitzvahs. So the Rebbe says, Nois Lamed Aleph, this will be understood by first prefacing an explanation for 2 things that are a bit of a wonder and a puzzle when it comes to the Megillas Esther. Benegel lekriyas Megillah, concerning the reading of the Megillah, meheichen koira adamas Megillah v'yoytz b'yedei chavasai, that from where does a person read the Megillah and he fulfills his obligation? We know we're supposed to read the entire Megillah, not miss a different word. But in the times of Chazal, they had a discussion about it. Yesh kama deis. There's a few opinions in the Chazal. Rabbi Shimon Yochai Omer Balaylahu Kim Shesham Maskal Tekvishal Nes Haschal's Bitlag Zed. Rabbi Shimon Yochai says you begin reading the Megillah from where it says at that night Achashverosh's sleep left him, he escaped him, and because of that he went hunting about what he could do for Mordechai and so on, because then the full force of the miracle began. In other words, the beginning of the nullification of the decree. Rabbi Yossi Omer me'achar advar ma'ela. Rabbi Yossi says you start reading the Megillah from after Vashti was killed and so on. So then it says that Achashverosh had appointed Haman over all the ministers, which is Takbesh al Haman, the power of Haman. Haschal Zatzar. So Rabbi Yossi says we have to read the Megillah from where it talks about the beginning of all the problems. Rabbi Yehuda Aimer Ish Yehudi. Rabbi Yehuda says from where it says that Ish Yehudi Haya B'Shushan Bira Shmai Mordechai, there was a Jewish person in Shushan, the capital, and his name is Mordechai, which is Toikvishal Mordechai. Over there it talks about the power of Mordechai, meaning Keitzad Heichen HaKadosh Baruch Hu Geulah. We have to read from where we see how Hashem prepared the redemption. But Rav Meir Omer Kula, and Rav Meir says the entire Megillah is read, like we do, maybe he me'achashverosh v'chein halacha, and so is the halacha. So the Rebbe asks, seemingly it's not understood. To be able to know that there was a very great problem, a very great threat to the Jewish people. And afterwards, you destroyed his schemes and you ruined his thoughts. It's enough to begin from where it says that night Achashverosh couldn't sleep. At most, from after these matters, Achashverosh raised up Haman. If you also want to know the pedigree, the lineage of Mordechai, you could begin from where it says a Jewish person was in Shushan, the capital. What does it matter, the entire lengthy story of that? It was in the days of Achashverosh and all of its details, the party, the 127 countries, and so on. When all that really matters is the conclusion. There was a decree against the Jewish people to destroy them. And afterwards, it was transformed, it was turned around. Despite that question, that to be able to fulfill the mitzvah of reading the Megillah, you have to read it in its entirety. And then the Rebbe says that it's even a question, there's certain rules in the Gemara when there's disputes who we follow. Seemingly, we shouldn't be following Rav Meir, and still in all of a year, we are ruling in the view of Rav Meir to begin at the beginning of the Megillah. Let's skip over to Ois Lamed Beis. And it's not enough, this great wonder that we have to read the entire Megillah from what was in the days of Achashverosh. When really all that matters is the conclusion that there was a decree against the Jewish people to destroy them. And afterwards it was transformed and turned around. Chazal add another thing, which is really another question, another wonder. They say, Kol Sifrei HaNeviim Masidim Lebat L'Maisa Moshiach. All the books of the prophets will eventually, when Moshiach comes, be nullified. Chutz from Megillas Esther halachas, except for Megillas Esther and halachas, the halachas of the Torah Sheba'al Peh, that will remain with us. Bebias HaMashiach and the coming of Moshiach, she'oz yikuyim hayid v'niglik v'ayid Hashem v'ro kol baso yachtav gomer. Then it will be fulfilled what was foretold, that the glory of Hashem will become revealed, and all flesh will see together godliness. Ve'esh b'chasruchi kol basar, I will pour out my spirit on all flesh. V'nibu b'neichem v'neisechem, even your sons and daughters will be prophets. Since prophecy will not be something extraordinary, something special, something precious, because even your sons and daughters will receive prophecy from above. That's why all the prophets will be nullified. What's it mean nullified? The Sfarim will still be there, but that the idea of prophecy won't have any significance. Every Jewish kid will be a prophet. Megillas Esther and halachas will not be nullified. So the Rebbe says like this, seemingly. This makes sense that halachas will not cease, because even when Mashiach comes, we need to know how we're supposed to do things, so we need to know the halachas. What's the reason that from all the prophecies and all the holy writings, Megillas Esther specifically will not be nullified? And according to what we said before, it will remain in its full importance, not like all the other books of prophets, which will not be significant anymore, because every child will be a prophet. So the Rebbe asks, why is the importance of Megillas Esther more than all the books of the prophets? When Mashiach comes, all the other Sfarim of the Nevi'im will have no value, no significance. Why? Because I will pour out my spirit on every flesh, and your sons and daughters will be prophesying. Megillas Esther, specifically Megillas Esther, that Hashem's name is not written anywhere there explicitly. There are hints to it. There's words that are written in the Rashi Tevis of Hashem, or the end of the words are come out to be Hashem's name. What does appear in Megillas Esther? Hashem's name is missing, but what does appear? A story about non-Jews is found over there in all the details. In other words, Achashverosh and his party, and how many countries, and how many years was into his reign, and then what he do with Vashti. All these details, seemingly, it's the polar opposites of any holy sefer, what it's about. And that, its importance will not be nullified in the days of Mashiach. And this itself, it's not just it won't be nullified. Not only from the section where it starts speaking about the miracle at that night that Achashverosh couldn't get any sleep, even the part that is just about Achashverosh's greatness and his parties and all the shikurim, like the Rebbe says over there in other sikhs, he says, with the zeltweg shikurim and with the gehuliat over there. So we have to say, we must say, there's a matter in Megillas Esther that's greater and loftier than all the books of the Nevi'im. From all other parts of the Torah, that's why even in the days of Mashiach it'll be a novelty, a unique thing. So now the Rebbe is going to finally inform us after asking all these questions. Hachidish b'Megillas Esther mudgish b'divrei HaMishnah shetzrichim lekroisa kula mivahiv me'achashverosh. The novelty of Megillas Esther is emphasized in the words of the Mishnah that says we need to read it in its entirety from Vayihi me'achashverosh. Hasipur, the Vayihi me'achashverosh, the story about that was in the days of Achashverosh that reigned from Hoidut at Kush, 127 countries, and he says Bishnas Sholish L'Malchas Mishtav. In the third year of his reign, he made a party. The Hemshcha Sipurim Vashti, in the continuation of the story with Vashti, Hareza Sipur B'Tfnei Atzmai. It seems to be a story completely unrelated to the Jewish people. Asher b'shas ma'isa loheven af echad sheyesh lo shaychus l'bnei Yisrael. At the time of the party and at the time of Vashti, what would a Yid say? Goyim are going crazy. Goyim hulyan. Goyim shikern zich. Goyim are partying. Goyim are killing their wives off. Yeah, what does that have to do with me? It has nothing to do with a Jew. Concerning the Jews, after that story happened a separate story. That the decree went against them. They fasted. They did also different natural types of things, like having Esther talk to Achashverosh, and they caused the decree to stop. So that attitude, that approach, that these are two unrelated events, is only at that time someone could have made that mistake. This was only after the matter was written about in Megillas Esther. Megillas Esther Megala, as opposed to the Megillah of Esther, reveals, the Rebbe in another place says Megillah from the word Gilui, revelation, for this very reason, Hashem ran the world, and He made everything come about. That a few years before the whole decree against the Jewish people, Achashverosh should become a king over 127 countries. And 3 years later, from above, they push him like to make a party. And Hashem arranges the things that Vashti should not want to come, and then everything else results from that. This means as follows: Megalim Lanu. It's revealed to us in the Megillah, whether we understand it, whether we don't. So that should be able to be that things were turned around, that the Jewish people were able to rule over their enemies. There had to be the beginning, that was in the days of Achashverosh, the reign from Hoidu until Cush. And if Achashverosh would not have been the one that reigned from Hoidu to Cush, then the entire idea of Venapechu would not have been able to take place. Seemingly, if we're talking about one nation that's scattered and spread out amongst all the nations of the world, Hashem has to burden and bother all the malachim above, the entire chain order of descent of all the spiritual realms and all the orders of nature, to make an Achashverosh a superpower. For this, Hashem has to make a whole deal over many years. Shekarach gam milchamas, it involved wars. Lifnei Kain Bavel, first had to be a war between Persia and Bavel. V'lachri Kainim Kodesh v'chol v'chol, and afterwards had to be a war with Kodesh. There was all stuff going on, revolutions and stuff, to be able to arrange that Achashverosh should rule over all these 127 countries. Seemingly everything to be able to save the Jewish people could have been arranged by Hashem in a simpler way. Still in all, even though to us logically it seems Hashem could have picked a simpler way to arrange for the Yidden to be saved, even though it's not understood, and it's a big wonder that Hashem made all of this go on and all of these things happening for years and wars and battle. It's a big wonder. Harayadin, who still in all the halacha is meheichen kaira adamas hamegillah v'yais b'dechavasai kula. From where's a person supposed to read the Megillah and fulfills his obligation? When he reads it in its entirety. The idea of Purim begins that it was in the days of Achashverosh that reigned from Hodu to Kush. Though the event itself occurred many years afterwards in Shushan Abira, this whole development. This is the novelty and uniqueness of Megillah Esther. The reading of the Megillah does not begin from the part where it says, I was turned around. We cannot reach the part of the Megillah that says it was turned around, that the Jewish people ruled over their enemies, unless we read the entire Megillah. We begin with the idea that Achashverosh was the one who reigned from Hodu to Kush. Then eventually we come to the idea that it was turned around. You think that you can do better in your things. You think if you'd be running the show, you'd be able to find an easier way to save the Jewish people. Hashem knows what He made, and He lets us know, and He testifies, like He writes in Megillah Esther, to be able to come to the power of the miracle. That's when we read the Megillah in its entirety from the beginning. So he says in Lamed Dalet, concerning this, Esther says, write me down for all generations. The above mentioned lesson is not just concerning the days of Purim, but for all generations. Every generation a Jew asks this question. Despite there's a big world around him, they tell a Jew, you have to go just the opposite of the world. We tell them, you're not going against the world to just do the opposite. That's not the point. Adra, but just the opposite. The whole being and what the Jew is about is the main existence of the world. And the entire world is surviving and standing upon you. For the sake of the Jewish people are called Reishis, the world was created. The Yisrael Gufa and the Jewish people themselves, for the sake of the Torah that's called Reishis. Then the Rebbe in the next paragraph says, true, we need to have the rest of the world to help us out, but it still doesn't make any sense that the fact that the world functions allows a Jew to do all he does. It's still, we're a tiny amount of the world, and to say the entire world is for this tiny piece, like we said before. Skip over to the next paragraph. Just like when we talk about a Jew, in comparison to the entire world, so too concerning within my own life, the amount of time that I devote to Torah mitzvahs. He calculates the number of hours in the day. And he calculates his order of his day. How many hours are apportioned for sleep? How much time is devoted to eating and drinking and matters of health? And how much time he spends in being involved in worldly matters, making a living, and so on. And the Rebbe says, and we're not talking about Rishoyim. We're talking about a Jew that's following the directives of Shulchan Aruch, corresponding to where it says that Hashem will bench you with all that you do. In other words, the Jew is supposed to do work in this world. You will gather your grain and your wine and your oil. Let's skip over to the next paragraph. Last line of the page. When he also adds to the calculation, and he calculates also his childhood years. Before he became obligated to perform mitzvahs. So therefore, if you add all those years, so the 12 or 13 years, that's not part of the picture at all. So he's got to now start calculating how much time is he spending on Torah mitzvahs after he became Bar Bas Mitzvah. Nimtza comes out, Shemiut Zman Balavad Mugdish Linyon Torah mitzvahs. Comes out that just a very small amount of time is devoted to matters of Torah mitzvahs. And the majority of time is seemingly used for secondary matters, matters of lesser import. Or insignificant import. So this is the question of the Yid concerning his own life. Why does he have to read the Megillah from the beginning? He should start from where it says that he turns it around. Meaning, it would have been better if Hashem would have created him as an adult, as a bar mitzvah. And also it would have been ideal. Hashem should have put him in such a situation where he doesn't need to eat and drink and sleep and be involved in business. And Hashem should have given him the possibility, if he only wants to, mitzvahs, to study Torah and fulfill mitzvahs, without any need to be involved in anything else, as Torah itself encourages the person to do, to be involved in other things other than Torah mitzvahs 24/7. The response to this request of a Jew, to this question of a Jew, that Hashem's response is Shabara Yehudi ba'ofen shel neshama beguf dafkim. He created a Jew, specifically a soul being invested in the body. Before the neshama descended down here, the way how he used to do things was that he was only involved in serving the Creator, meaning when the neshama was in Gan Eden. I swear by Hashem that I stood before him, and standing means davening. It's referring to the neshama in Gan Eden, is always davening to Hashem. This is the way the malachim act now. The Torah was not given to the angels. The world was not created for angels, but for the Jewish people. In such a manner that the neshama should be specifically down here, in a body, with the physical needs, with going to work, etc. When a Yid asked, what's his connection with, it was in the days of Achashverosh, meaning what's his connection with all the worldly things, with all the things going on around him? His connection is what it says, that the Jewish people had light and joy and happiness and glory. The Chazal say that light is referring to Torah, Simcha that's referring to the Yom Tov, Sas and Zumila, it's going on the Bris, V'yikare Elutfilm, Yikare is going on Tfilm. So that's his world, not Vayive Me'ach HaShverish. Why do we drag him into having a connection with Vahiva Me'ach HaShverish? Meaning, why do you have to eat and drink and be involved in worldly matters? So a Yid is told, from where is a person supposed to read the Megillah and fulfills his obligation? When he reads it in its entirety. Only then can we reach the state of turning things around, of transforming it. Now we're going to bring this back to why this is something that's going to be in the times of Moshiach. Lamed Hey, the Inyan Zeh, the idea of the large world around us and all the preoccupations of the world, etc., still being around when Moshiach comes matters. Even in the days of Moshiach, when now transform all the nations, will have a clear language to serve them all together as one. It won't be such a state where it will only remain the existence of the Jewish people and there will only be Torah and Hashem. That's not the way it's going to be. Even when Mashiach comes, the Jewish people are still going to be the fewest of all the nations. And the foreigners, the other nations, will stand and they will take your sheep out to pasture. When Mashiach comes, there will be sacrifices. Therefore, you're going to have animals. Therefore, there also have to be vegetation. Why? Because we know even the lions will eat straw like cattle. There'll also be when Moshiach comes plowing and sowing. It says Moshiach comes, that the one who carries his bundles will carry it in joy. Also all the other labors are connected with the inanimate things. Seemingly it's not understood what's going on over here. Why when Mashiach comes we'll have all these mundane activities. It finally happened. Eventually, the time came. We couldn't barely hold out, and that's it. We're finished with the suffering and the pang and Geulah's pangs. And we merited Mashiach coming. Tachlis Abriya, which is the goal of the creation. Like the Rambam wrote, then we'll be free in Torah and its wisdom without any disturbance. In such a way that the earth will be filled with the knowledge of Hashem, like waters covers the sea. If that is the case, that's what Mashiach's time is about. What is the need that there should be the existence of all the nations that will have a clear language? Either they should become transformed to become Jews. If they don't become Jews, what's the need that there should be the existence of foreigners, that we need to be involved with them? Lost in Saru, leave us alone. We should be able to sit and study without any burdens, without any bothers, without any need for plowing and sowing, of carrying his bundles, eating and drinking, etc., etc. That's what one would think should be. In actuality, when Mashiach comes, there won't just be the existence of the entire human species, meaning also non-Jews, also the existence of all living creatures, vegetation and inanimate things, in such a manner that it can be visible that the entire world was only created to command this one, meaning the Jewish people, the fewest of all the nations. The Lord is there, so as Hashem, they should be learning Torah in such a way that the earth is filled with the knowledge of Hashem, like the waters covers the sea. True, it'll be fulfilled what was said, that the glory of Hashem will become revealed, and all flesh will see together that Hashem spoke. Like it's brought down in Medrash, in the future, if a person goes to pick his fig tree on Shabbos, the fig tree itself will shout out and say that today is Shabbos. This is vegetation. Even when it comes to inanimate things, even a stone will cry out. Like it says, that a stone from the wall will cry out. The inanimate things, the inorganic things, will only be something in service, only something secondary. Like it says, foreigners will arise and they will take your sheep out to graze. And the main existence of the Jewish people will be to be involved in Torah and its wisdom. Like we said before, this doesn't make any sense. An entire world should spin so that a small amount of Jews quantitatively should be able to sit in peace and study Torah. To teach us this lesson, we say, even in the days of Moshiach, Megillas Esther will not cease. Even when all the prophecies will not have any significance, like we said before, I will pour out my spirit on all flesh. Like that, there'll be much knowledge and wisdom. Like it's brought down the Zohar, should be equal to the Mashiach, on the heels of Mashiach. There'll be a great amount of knowledge in Torah, even by the children of the world. How much more so after the glory of Hashem is revealed? Also then they'll study Torah with the Yidden. There will be a need in having this lesson of Megillas Esther. What is the lesson? It's the entire story begins from, it was in the days of Achashverosh. Lamed Vav. And the main thing is the lesson concerning our service now. A Yid should not be scared when he makes a calculation and he sees that the general Jewish people is a small minority. A minority of a minority in comparison to the rest of the nations. Amongst the Yidden themselves, his group, those that follow his approach, are in the Bnei Yisrael itself, they are a minority of a minority. How could he claim that he is fighting for the truth, the Torah of life and mitzvahs, that about it says you shall live with them? The lachura leitachen vein makom b'seichel loimer shakadosh baruch hu bara olam gadol kazeh seemingly makes no sense that Hashem created such a huge world b'shvil kvutza ktana sheyehudim shemanichim tefillin loishim tzitzis shem Shabbos veichum kosher, for a small group of Jews that are putting on tefillin, wearing tzitzis, keeping Shabbos, and eating kosher. So the Rebbe says, Ki yesh la'ira shelamedim mizmani shel Achashverosh ba'ofen dekisfuni ledoros. There is the lesson that we derive from the time of Achashverosh in such a way that's written for all generations. For the Jewish people it was light and joy. For that was the entire reign of Achashverosh. Over 127 countries, the entire political thing. And so too in every single generation. You do not have to fear the numbers, the quantity. Even if the quantity is much more, when he has the quality that's connected with the source, the life of our life, this is something that outweighs and balances out the entire world to the side of truth and life. And then the Rebbe says further over here that everything, even though we're saying that it makes no sense, but still in all, we have to at least make some sense of it, as much as it's possible for us, our limited minds, to make sense of it. So let's skip over to the second paragraph on page 54. Similarly, also concerning what we said above, also in the future, when the glory of Havaya will become revealed. We will see, even if we don't understand, that there's only a few that are studying Torah and fulfilling mitzvahs. That foreigners will arise and they will take your sheep out to pasture. Specifically in the latter years, the closer we're becoming to the time of Moshiach, when the glory of Hashem will become revealed, we revealed in the world, even in a small quantity of something, there could be concealed in it unbelievable powers qualitatively. Through that small amount that's concealed in the atom, through the power of an atom, you could destroy an entire world. Million, a milliard, billion, even though that the actual world is millions of times or billions of times greater than the atoms that are used to make to cause this explosion. And the Rebbe says the negative is always not as much and not as good as the positive. If that's talking about the action of something that is negative, in other words, destruction, how much more so when it comes to the good side, that the good measure is greater, that in a small amount we could insert a great amount in quality, even though it's a small amount in quantity. Very powerful and wondrous powers, that through it we can build an entire world from its beginning to the end. So the Rebbe says in the next paragraph that it still doesn't mean that there's a logical explanation. It's just we see an example. In fact, let's skip over the paragraph afterwards. So too concerning what we said about being written down for all generations, that we appoint a superpower, or someone that rules in a superpower, so that many years later in Shushan Abira, the whole wars and the whole country and the whole 127 countries they ruled over was all for just a bunch of a small nation of the Yidden. The decree should be removed from them. Hine kol amizboinen yocholimtze de gmose becholder v'doyer v'kama protim. Any person that contemplates upon this and thinks about it can find similarities to this in every single generation, and they can find it in many aspects and many details. B'chaim protim, in his own individual life. Shalafamim toifsim la'achre kama v'kama shonim. Sometimes only after many years later do we realize Shema'ura Mesuyim She'ira L'fnei As Esri Shonim, a specific event that occurred decades ago. Godam Lakach Shala'achre Kama V'Kama Shonim Tia Etzle Atzola Purta Atzola Geulah. It caused that eventually, many years later, it caused them a minor salvation or maybe a greater salvation. So too it's concerning the whole Klal Yisrael. Like the Rambam writes, this is an actual thing. When a Jew adds one mitzvah, through that he balances and outweighs himself and the entire world to the side of merit, and he brings them help and salvation, Moshiach, through the coming of Moshiach. This means v'hainu shepu'ula achas shel Yehudi, the one activity, one action of a Jew, shel Yehudi echad, of one Jew, berega echad, in one moment, yesh b'koicha l'shanis u'lahapech u'lahavias Moshiach l'mat masar tvachim. It has the power to change and transform and to bring Moshiach down here below 10 handbreadths, ba'ofen shel simcha, in a way of joy, tova chesed, goodness and kindness, hanira v'anigla, it's visible and revealed, oira v'simcha v'sasim v'kar, light and joy and happiness and glory.